They start out on a journey to safety cultural excellence, but soon get derailed. They get discouraged because it's a long way, it's difficult, it's hard to change culture, or they just simply move on to the next flavor of the month, right? What's our new safety incentive we're going to try, or what's our new, safety program that we're going to install, right? But I believe what we need to do is continually evolve our process. Now, the Appalachian Trail is just a few miles out my back door. I live in Virginia, and every year hundreds of people start this 2,000-mile hike up the AT, but few really ever finish it. This is my brother-in-law, Kevin. Now, he prepared for a solid year to hike the Appalachian Trail. He took off 6 months of work. He was going to climb the whole thing from Georgia all the way up north. And similar to many of you in your organizations, right? When you're looking to change your culture, you read books, you get enabling technology like SafetyNet, and you have all the latest equipment. And he thought he was prepared. Now, he had a roadmap, he had the motivation, but a month into his journey, he got derailed by a serious sprained ankle, and his journey stalled. And like many of you who believe they have a plan, but failed to follow through on that plan, you also stall in reaching that world-class safety culture. So today, we're going to talk about a similar journey, one that can be long, filled with unexpected barriers, and sometimes it's really hard to see the forest for the trees. So what we're going to do is talk about how we can use our data to reach this safety culture excellence. Now, over the 20-plus years I've been doing this, I've seen companies go through different phases, right? They're either at their starting phase, and generally they do something to try to improve safety. And you see this big emphasis on safety. And then you become kind of organizationally complacent and get on this plateau. And often this initiation of doing this revolves around creating a better safety culture. So for us to get to good to great, we need to focus on culture. And then specifically, SafetyNet provides us great tools to help measure our progress on that journey. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, how good is our safety culture? I mean, many people just would say, well, you'll look at your incident rate, and that should tell you how good it is. But I'm not a firm believer in that, because we have many of our current clients who have relatively a small amount of injuries per year. So if you have 1 or 2 injuries, more or less, does that mean you're improving or getting worse? I don't think so, right? So today, we're going to talk about what are some ways we can measure safety culture, because that's where we need to focus our emphasis to see if we need to do something different, right? So we're going to cover that one too. So as the soil, however rich it may be, cannot be productive without cultivation, so the mind or organization without safety culture can never produce good fruit or eliminate death on the job this century. So we need to focus on culture. But you know what? When people talk about culture, what I found is that what they're really referring to is climate. There is a distinct difference, and I'm going to kind of talk about those two things because I think it's people overestimate culture change initiatives. So climate is experientially based, meaning your experiences in an organization, right? Those are the climate of the organization. So climate is based on the description of what people see, they report happening to them in an organizational situation. Whereas climate, instead of describes what happens, it defines why things happen. And there's a lot of information out there. If you're interested, these authors down here can help give you a good distinction between these two. But let me give you just a brief overview. Climate is really people's perception of what the organization is like in terms of their practices, policies, procedures, routines, rewards. All those things are an organizational climate. And I'm not talking about, you know, it's 85 degrees in here. I'm talking about when we go to our job, what is the climate like? What do people do? What are their attitudes like, right? So climate focuses on more the situation, and it's linked to people's perceptions, feelings, and behaviors. So climate is a lot more based on time, right? It's very subjective, and it's subjective to manipulation. For instance, if I give you a raise at the end of the year, it may improve the climate of the organization, but it may not influence the culture. So culture, on the other hand, are employees and organizations' ideologies, assumptions, right? It can be influenced by symbolic events like maybe a new CEO, or your organization gets bought by another larger organization, or your culture can carry around a lot of artifacts from the way things used to be, right? Now, culture is a lot more stable than climate, and it has strong roots in the organization's history. And it's very difficult to change culture quickly, right? It's very resistant to manipulation, whereas giving people more money may make people feel better on the short term. It may not improve the culture at all. Now, I'm not saying that you can't change culture. I would say that it takes between 3 to 5 years to see culture change. It may be a little bit quicker, may take a little bit longer, depending on where you are in your journey. For instance, I worked with a oil rigger organization out in California, and those guys had a 60% turnover rate. I mean, imagine trying to replace 60% of your workforce every year. So, you know, when people say, well, that's how we've always done it around here, it means that's how we've done it for the last month, right? So in that case, initiating change was a lot quicker because people kept rotating, right? So culture is a lot deeper phenomenon. It's what they call a construct, right? And it reflects core values and all these things that are part of the core of an organization. So if you think about this, what can impact this long-term culture? And to me, it starts out with your values. Now, everyone that works in an organization has their own core values and beliefs, but organizations also have core values and beliefs. Those are those things that are typically, when you walk into the corporate office, they're plastered on the wall, right? There are a mission statement or vision statement or core values or beliefs, right? Because those core values and beliefs, whether they're internal to the employee or external in the organization, influence people's behavior. It's very difficult for us as people to do something that goes against our core values and beliefs. We feel inconsistent, right? So our values tend to influence what we do. That's that behavior. Now, when people do a variety of different things in organizations, that can influence leadership. So everyone's heard the phrase, right, if you're going to talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. Well, this is kind of what it's referring to. When people first come into an organization, right, they first sample the environment, not the physical environment. They may sample the climate of the environment. You know, what do I need to do to get my job done? What do I need to do to fit in? What do I need to do to look good to my supervisor? So all these things that can influence the environment are something we have to focus on because this creates the culture. Now, if I were to ask you, do values influence the culture or does the culture influence the values, right? What would you say? Now, I think if you have a strong set of core values and beliefs and people are behaving in the way that are consistent with those, you create this really resilient culture. So when new people come into that culture, they look at what people are doing, what people are saying, those core values that are plastered on the wall, and they see consistency. Well, that's going to influence. That strong culture is going to reinforce those core values and beliefs. Although, on the other hand, those core values, if they're weak, right, you don't see a lot of consistency, can say that maybe it's a weak culture. So I think it gets back to focusing on who we are as an organization. And really, the the HR professionals are no longer just focusing on people's fundamental attributes like can they get the job done. They're focusing on will they fit within the culture that we're trying to create. Because if you can get that knocked out, you're going to have a long-term employee who will fit within our culture. So let's define it, all right? So if we define safety culture, culture is people with shared beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, and values, right? And I think these are power words if you think about it, right? A belief is an acceptance of truth. An attitude is your personal view on something. And a behavior, right, again, is anything you could see a person do. And those values, again, influence those behaviors. Now, if we were to define industrial safety, right, safety, and this is just a definition, right, is the prevention and investigation of occupationally related injuries and health matters, right? So you have rules, regulations, policies, procedures, training, safety management systems, right? There's a whole bunch of things we do when we do safety. Job safety briefs, you know, we look at audit inspections, accident investigation, all these things are activities when we're doing industrial safety. Now, here's a definition of safety culture, and this is from the UK, and I really kind of like the words that they use, right? So safety culture is the product of an individual and group values, attitudes, perceptions, competencies, and patterns of behavior that determine a commitment to and style and proficiency of an organization's health and safety management. So when you are trying to use strategies to improve culture, you have to first figure out where you are at and what you need to do to move the needle, to move from good to great, to move from best in class to world class. And this is one exercise that I've been doing for years. And it's not a new exercise, but let me kind of describe how I would roll you through this exercise, and then this is the takeaway you can go and do this afternoon. So if your safety culture is going to improve, what will it look like, right? How will you know things have changed? What will employees do the same? What will they do differently? What will the management do the same or differently? So what I have groups of employees do is write down some ideas as to what this world-class safety culture would look like, right? So have them list cultural characteristics, right? Behavior, attitudes, what would people do differently, what would their attitudes be, and then other safety characteristics, right? We have good retraining, for example. Now you can do this one of two ways. You can take a group of your employees, leaders, break them up into teams and have the teams answer these and then report out as a group. Or you can just do it, you know, as a large group and say, all right, someone give me some examples of this, and then flip chart them. So when you flip chart them, what you can also do is see if people are saying things that you believe already are tackled, right? That would reveal a gap in culture. And if people are saying things that, you know, you say, you know, this would be a great thing for us to focus on in the next quarter. Right, so people might say, well, we're going to look out for each other, we're going to report more near misses, we're going to work as a team. So you can just pick one of those and focus to try to improve it, right? So how do we measure this world-class safety culture? So we just did an exercise that says, all right, this is what world-class safety culture looks like. How would we measure that? And really, there's a couple of ways of doing it. Through cultural proxies or other leading indicators. And people have been talking about leading indicators forever, right? So what are the leading indicators we need to record? Let me focus on cultural proxies first. Cultural proxies are conditions or behaviors that are representative of a good safety culture. So when I'm specifically talking about safety cultural proxies, right, these are things that, activities or conditions that would be present in having this best-in-class safety culture. So, measuring culture by way of proxy. I don't care who tells you that they have a cultural survey. You cannot actually measure culture. I don't care what people show you. What they're measuring are people's perceptions of the culture. They're not actually measuring the culture. And the reason why I make this point is that people's perceptions and behaviors can actually lag reality. And I think you know what I mean, right? You, as an organization, may be doing things a lot differently now, but some employees are holding on to maybe being mistreated several years ago, right? They carry that around like luggage. So what we're really doing when you're going out there and measuring via culture or interviews is people's perceptions. And then when we do behavioral observations or audits or inspections, we're looking at people's behaviors or the condition of the organization to get a proxy of culture. So we need to find a suitable substitute, right? That's what proxy means for a positive safety culture. And we're already collecting a lot of this. Most of you on the call are safety net users, so you're already collecting leading indicators or organizational proxies. So one thing that I do as part of my job in Predictive Solutions is help organizations change culture. So for several of our clients, I've given safety surveys and done interviews to try to measure what people's perception is of the current safety culture. So here's an example of a question that I might use. Now in this case, it's a kind of a before and after. So the original survey was done back in 2009, and then this current one on top here is results from last year. So back in 2009, the question was, do you think craft feels blamed when they are part of an injury or incident? Right, back in 2009, you can see a lot of people said yes, and a few people said no, they don't feel blamed. Now, the way that I do this interview process is I do small group interviews, 8 to 10 people, and I record their responses and record specific statements that they say. So each one of these X's represents one group. Now, the red X's and the red comments represent leaders. So in this case, you can see a lot of the employees said, yes, we feel blamed. But a lot of leaders say, oh, no, they don't feel blamed. We're good at fact-finding. But see, this gap between what the leaders feel and what the employees feel, this is a cultural proxy. And then also some of these comments, how could you not feel blamed? You're gone before the paper hits or the pencil hits the paper, right? I love pulling out some of these nuggets. Now, did it change to 2015? See, look at the difference here. So do you think craft feels blamed? A few people, yeah, they still feel blamed. And interestingly, 2 of the groups that were leaders said, yeah, we still blame employees, or they feel like it, but not as many or the craft feel, right? So this is a good way of identifying some of those cultural gaps. So if people are feeling blamed, what can we do? What data can we provide to help them feel like when we go out and we do observations or follow up an injury with investigation or more better an assessment, right, of what happened? You know, those are things that we can focus on. Here's another question. Do employees hide injuries? Again, this client back in 2009, you can see all the leaders are saying, no, employees don't hide injuries. But when I ask all the employees, they're like, yeah, we hide injuries, right? And look at this, avoid the hassle, we don't report. Or yes, you'll get thrown off the job. Now, you know, fast forward 6 years, and again, 3 to 5 years to change culture, you have a lot fewer people saying that employees hide injuries. Still, some people do, right? But a lot fewer people. So to me, these are things that demonstrate how we can use surveys and interviews to get some of this. So if you're interested in doing something like this, give me a shot, we can chat. Now, two other methods for measuring cultural proxies. One, a lot of people do audits and inspections, and some people do behavioral observations. So one is more compliance-based, right? Are you complying with rules, regulations, policies, procedures? And observations are more behavior-based, right? There's a lot of people who are using behavior-based safety. So these are good ways of measuring cultural proxies. So when we're looking at this information, what does it tell us? Well, the purpose of going out and observing and doing audits is really to assess our safety systems. And over the years of doing safety, right, we've been getting better and better. And I believe that because every time somebody gets hurt, we tend to put up a barrier, right? We write a new policy or procedure, we put a new engineering fix in, we get a sensor or barrier up, or we wrap people in another piece of PPE. But you see these little holes? These little holes in our barriers, those represent weaknesses in our safety system. Right? We might not have a policy and procedure for everything. People might default guards or take them off. People might not wear all the required PPE. But essentially, why we've gotten better over the years is because when somebody does something that's risky, right, we tend to have a barrier there to stop them from getting hurt, right? And we have redundancy in our barriers such that if something gets by it, we have something right behind it to stop it. And really now, in a lot of our companies we work with specifically, the only time somebody gets hurt is when all of these just line up, right? And people are looking at that going, wow, how did that happen? So again, what this is doing is identifying these holes in our culture or process. So companies gather this information, and many of you know before you started using SafetyNet, they struggle with it, right? Because a lot of people look, oh no, we're 98% safe, right? So they start questioning the validity and reliability of this data. And another thing that they struggle with is using this observation intelligence. So people collect all this valuable information, and it sits in a filing cabinet or an electronic filing cabinet called Excel, and they fail to use it. And then what happens is you lose momentum, and you start going down this downward spiral. So how do you lose this momentum? Well, like I said, organizations sit on the information. That's a big problem. Some leaders hand it off to safety. It's not my problem. Give it to the safety guys. Why I hired them, right? Or there's often no follow-up. So people may turn in observations, and they don't even know if things have gotten fixed or followed up on. And then an employee starts seeing no value in this process, and then they lose faith, and that's a huge problem. And then it just turns into another flavor of the month, what we used to do, right? I call this the Venomous Cycle. Whenever organizations, and this just isn't specific to safety, this can be in any organizational endeavor, right? Trying to roll out Six Sigma or lean manufacturing or 5S, whatever it may be, people can fall into this venomous cycle. So for example, you start a new observation process. People get excited, they go out, they do observations, collect this information, turn it in, and they don't see any information. They don't get any feedback from it. They don't see any results. They don't see any of the data. They don't see anything change. So the next time I go out, I may still be motivated, but I may not be as specific. I may not be writing as many comments, right? And then what happens? Well, leaders don't act on that data because they don't trust it, they don't believe in it, and then employees start pencil whipping it because they don't think anyone's reading it. I mean, then you get down this thing where employees and leaders both feel like they're throwing money down the toilet. We just rolled out this new thing and no one's using it. And the employees start feeling the same way. Yeah, you know, if I just keep my head down long enough, you know, something else will come along. All right, so what we want to try to change that to is this virtuous circle. Collect this information, analyze it, and being able to predict it and get out in front of this information. This is what's going to make us move from good to great. So to assess culture by using this leading indicator data and create this virtuous circle, here are some things we can do within SafetyNet. And I'm going to cover these things in the next few slides. So one thing we can do is start looking at the severity. Okay, so one thing that we get our clients to do is write down the severity of when they see something that's risky, unsafe, non-compliant, right? Now, here's one of our clients. They started out with us many years ago. They started using compliance inspection. And for 3 years, they were collecting information. And they collected 16,000 things, close to 1 million items, and they were 98% safe. After those 3 years, they switched over to more of a behavioral observation process, and they saw a lot more behavior, right? 188,000, 7.2 million. Close to 70,000 at-risk things were identified and given feedback on, yet 99% safe. So just looking at this on the surface, would you say they improved? Well, the only way to know, again, is to look at severity. So if you look at this information, right, if we look at the percent, back in the compliance days, 80% were low, or if you combine these two, 97% were low or medium. I think that's the low-hanging fruit. That's the easy safety glasses, hard hat, housekeeping, right? Now, still, there's a big proportion of low, but look at how much more they're open to observing medium and high. Interestingly, life threat proportion-wise stayed very similar. So in this culture, back before, when I was talking to employees when they were doing compliance inspections, this one guy said, yeah, I'm never turning in a life threat again, because when I did, they had these people coming in from corporate, going down on zip lines from helicopters in black suits, and you know, they just say, hey, I'm from corporate, I'm here to help. I'm never turning into one of those things. So what this tells me culture-wise is that they're more open and more honest in recording what they really see. So that's one thing we can look at. So if you're looking at trying to assess where your culture is, that's one place to start. Another thing we can do is use the indexes. Now, there's an observer index, and the observer index is our system of ranking a quality of an observer. So this little index percentile tells you where you are within the organization. So 94th percentile. Now, if you were to click on that percentile, you'd be brought up this more specific graph for that individual person. So let's say, for instance, we look at this example where there's too many safes. So let's just say that this is Kent. I'm giving him feedback on his performance. So if we look at participation, he's out there a lot, right? He's in the 60th percentile. Only 40% are doing more observations than Kent. Now, when he's going out there, you can see that he's seeing a whole lot of safe things, and he's not seeing too many risky things, right? So if we were to look at this, he's seeing a lot of safe things, he's participating a lot, and the majority of observations he's turning in are 100% safe. Not seeing a whole lot of risky things, and even when he does see something risky, it's not very severe. And rarely does he write a comment. So to me, this says that this person has lost faith in our process, right? They're not getting any value proposition out of this. I was sharing this with a group of, not employees, but at a conference attendees. And this guy raised his hand and says, yeah, Chuck, I got this whole observation thing figured out. I take over a handful of checklists. I have my daughter fill them out. I give her $5, I bring them back, and I'm done for the whole year. So to me, I don't blame that employee. They don't see this as a valuable use of their time. So again, this is a cultural proxy. We need to deliver value. All right, here's another example. I call this the pencil whipper version 2. Very similar. They're out there observing all the time, 95 percentile, right? Only 5% are doing more. However, if you look closer at the data, it looks like they're only checking off one or two things. So I call this malicious compliance. Oh yeah, I'll do your stupid observation there. I see Kent over there, he's wearing the safety glasses. Check, I'm done. I turn it in, right? So there's no comments. Not 100% safe because they're only checking off one or two things. Right, so in this case, this employee is completely disengaged. So this gives us an opportunity to coach. And again, it may be a particular area, maybe they didn't get enough training. Anyway, it reveals a cultural proxy. Number 4, not enough safe observations. Now this is an interesting one. Here, you see participation is doing pretty good, but they rarely see safe things and hardly ever do 100% safe. But when they're out there observing, they always find something that's risky, it's usually high severity, and they're writing comments. So to me, when I read this, what the data is telling me about the culture is it's a ticket writing culture or fault finding, right? So when do they do an observation? Probably when they see someone doing something risky. Ha, I gotcha. You write it up and you essentially hand them a ticket. Now, you don't want to discourage this person because they're observing a lot. What you have to do is shape the behavior. Get them to go out and observe the whole system and process, not just catching people doing something wrong. All right, lack of participation. Now, this is an interesting one. So here, they're not participating very much, but when they do, they're doing a pretty good job of it, right? So, pardon me, I tend to see this more in like the corporate safety people or maybe executives who go out and do observations, right? They're not out there a lot, but when they do go out, they're seeing a good variety of things and write and comment, sometimes seeing 100% safe, but not all the time. So in this case, I think this is a good opportunity for coaching. Right? They go out there and they do things. But a lot of times people just look at the observer summary report and say, oh, you only did one observation this month. They don't look at the quality of that observation. So again, if you see low participation, you might believe that's a cultural proxy, but just go in and take a look. Are they doing a really good job? Do they not have an opportunity? Do you need to provide backup so someone can go out and do good quality observation? Maybe they can't feel like they can't leave the line or their process or the job. And number 6, little or no open items. So if you have little open items, it's either A, you're really good at following up and closing them, or B, people are afraid to leave something open. And if that's the case, again, there's a lot of people that don't want my department, my area, my site look bad, so they don't leave something open. So again, if you're not getting a whole lot of open issues, you might go back and ask yourself, well, did these guys really close this out, fix it on the spot, or are they afraid to leave it open? Also, not closing out open items could be a problem too. If people aren't closing out open items within the time period that we want, we're not looked at as a very responsive organizational team. And here's another good one. I call this the 30-second observation. So much like the pencil whipper version 2, they just look at the easy observables. So here, if you're looking at your summary report, the majority, 32%, is on PPE. Really? And that's a lot. I have some some organizations that are taking PPE off or going to a more focused checklist, because what this might tell you is that, oh yeah, I'm comfortable because I can see, eyeglasses and, vests, and gloves, but the other stuff I'm kind of fuzzy on. So my buddy Kerry loves the idea of having focus checklists or just having your people focus on a particular category, right? So maybe you focus on PPE when you first start out, and then you move to more like excavation or, different types of mobile equipment used, right? And then you get them to have some fluency on observing these type of things before they move on to the next one. So again, this might indicate they're not taking enough time. It may indicate they're not comfortable with the other items on the checklist, or it might indicate they're just disengaged. And the same, very much like the first example I gave here, you look at this and they don't even want life threat on their checklist. So first of all, that gives me an indication that there's some trust issues there. Now, I've had some clients change life threat to life saved, right? Because if you stop someone in that situation, you might have just saved their life. So maybe it's just a verbiage thing. And again, here you look at the 80% are all low and medium. Now, if we look at what some of those are that are high, right? So slip trip hazards, eye and face protection. So if this is the number one, that's got to be something we got to focus on. Eye and face protection, not wearing safety glasses, face shields, whatever, that may be an easy one, but slip and trip hazards, wow. All right, so let's focus on that. So number 9, identifying your gold star observers. Not every observer that's going to be in your organization is going to be equal, right? You know those people out there that do good quality observation. So I call those your gold star observers. And within SafetyNet, you can designate people as a designee. Now I use this in terms of making the designee the gold star observer, right? The one that you know you're getting good observations out of. So if we were to compare the non-designee, which is just your average everyday observer, and compare that with the designee, in this case, they're really close. So to me, if your gold star observers are seeing what the regular observers are seeing, you know that you got a pretty good culture going on. On the other hand, if you see something like this, so your designees are not seeing the same things as your designees, that is a gap that we have to be concerned with. So when it's the regular observers out there, like, yeah, everything's okay, but when your good skilled observers are out there, they're seeing things that aren't as good. Well, that's something we need to focus on. So again, using your indexes can help you dig a little bit deeper within your culture. Then I talked a little bit about this, but tracking open items to closure, again, can demonstrate that commitment. The quicker we are to finding and fixing what people identify, creates this value proposition. And I was at a location not long ago. They had a stalled process. I came in, revamped it, and what was interesting is that they were just using paper and pencil. Now they're using the app. And one thing an employee did was said, you know what, take a look at this grading. People have been tripping on this grade for years. I've been turning stuff in, nobody's fixing it. Do an observation on me tripping over this thing. So they did an observation, took a picture. It got, sent up to the leadership team. They looked at the open items, and they said, well, how long has this been fixed or out there? Oh, yeah, it's been out there for like a year. And the guy's like, get that fixed tomorrow. So they got it fixed, took an after picture, and then they started focusing on showing the employees before and after pictures. So it demonstrates the value of the process. So let me finish off by talking about a case study. And this case study talks about improving culture, measuring culture, and actually measuring leadership culture. So this was back several years ago. We started by assessing the culture. We did cultural assessments, both written and interviews, and then we created this culture change initiative, this step change. And then after the third year, we did these sustainability activities to help drive this culture. And just recently, we started working with them again to help, again, evolve their culture to the next iteration. So this is a utility. We work with a lot of utility companies. This is electric and gas distribution, substations, transmission design, construction, 5,500 employees total, 3,000 at-risk, meaning field employees, and they're across 8 different states. So these guys are the ones climbing up poles, going down in holes, and things like that. So they connected with us back in 2004. They were our first utility to use SafetyNet, and we helped them design their checklist. They trained 350 frontline supervisors. And in 2005, they really started rolling this out. But the problem was they really had mixed success. There was no accountability. They didn't feel like the data they were getting was quality, and it's primarily because the culture didn't accept it. And what I tend to see whenever you roll out a new process, again, it's not solely in safety, but right, any process thing you start, you see this initial bump in organizational performance, right? And then we tend to reach that point where we get comfortable with it and we lose that momentum. And then someone says, hey, get out there and do your observations again, right? And then you see it go up again, and then eventually it slowly dwindles away, and it becomes the process that we used to do. Now, this example, take a look at this. So they started again back in 2004. You can see that exact same pattern, right? They had a peak, and then someone said, hey, you got to get out there and do observations. Okay, I'll do it. hey, you got to get back out there, right? You can just see this going up and down. It's very, very accountability driven. And the data that they were getting, they weren't convinced it was really good. Now, hello?
Are you there, Chuck?
I'm here.
Okay.
Hold on, my slide is stuck. So what we want to see is, right, that process improve, but we want to continually evolve the process over time so we can drive that loss down. So in this organization, what we saw was this process get improved over time. So here's what we did. We went out and interviewed field employees across 8 states, very similar to the questions that I showed earlier, right? We looked for gaps. We conducted internal communication surveys. They got 2,000 of the 5,500 surveys. And then we tried to change the way the executives looked at safety and developed safety initiatives. What we did is we designed a 2-day leadership workshop. And what this leadership workshop focused on was really trying to get people to think differently about safety, to go out there and start coaching instead of policing. Now, there was a 2-day workshop. This is from the top executive, CEO, down to the supervisors. And the working foreman or crew leads, right, they did a 1-day workshop. They trained 1,500 employees in 5 months. And one of the keys was every session was kicked off by the executive. And it wasn't taught by just safety, right? It was taught by a manager and one of the safety consultants. That's what they call their safety people. So they had different supporting cultural initiatives. They redesigned their accident investigation process and called it incident analysis. They changed their near miss process to care enough to share. And they did a variety of other things to try to influence the culture. One of the things that they did that I really loved was they changed their scorecard. Safety for the leadership team was 20% of their scorecard. 50% was based on behavioral metrics, which I'll explain in a minute, and the other 50% of the 20% was based on injury rate. So we couldn't drop injury rate totally out of the equation, but we got them to do more of the behavioral metrics. But the kicker was, if you didn't do the behavioral metrics, you didn't get any of that 20%. So the behavioral metrics were doing crew observations, safety meeting participation, and safety reviews. So what we did is they had leadership engagement goals. So for the executive and directors, these are the senior level leaders, right, they had to do crew visits, not audits or inspections, just visits. So the executives had to go out to 3 different crews, 3 per quarter, and directors had to do 6 per quarter. And then the leaders had to pick engagement activities to do. The executives had to pick 4 and the directors had to pick 4. So what we did is we got a group of employees together and said, what were some activities that would demonstrate this commitment to safety that your leaders could do? So here's a list they came up with. So attend a safety meeting, participate in recognition events. One of the cultural gaps that I discovered when I talked to a lot of the employees was they would say, yeah, back in the olden days, we used to get recognized and they'd have a safety luncheon and people would come and give us watches. And now we just get mailed our certificate in the mail. So they rarely saw their leadership. So they focused a lot on getting people out there and doing activity. So again, you remember in the beginning when I talked about people behaving in a particular way that demonstrates leadership? This is what they were talking about. Now, that was the senior level leaders. The managers and supervisors had similar things, like cascading goals. Managers had to do crew visits 6, supervisors 9, and 6 and 12 for these engagement activities. Now, when it comes to doing it, before we did this initiative, they had about 200 crew visits per month. After, they had about 1,300 crew visits per month. Now it's up into several hundred, 1,000 per month. Now for the managers and supervisors, they had a goal of 13,000, and if we looked at them, they blew the goal out of the water. They did a total of 15,000. Now, for the senior level leaders, I would have bet my paycheck that they would have met that goal to the nose, right? But they actually blew that goal out of the water, 420. So, again, if you think about cultural impacts, getting those senior level leaders, the CEO, CFO, out to these field guys and getting them to be introduced and talk to them, it closed that gap pretty quickly. So they did a follow-up survey after we rolled this out, and what we found is that the more times leadership observed an employee, the more likely he or she is to bring up a near miss. The employee proves more likely to believe his manager cares when they are observed more, and leaders view crew observations as an opportunity to commend and encourage safe behavior, not to catch someone doing something wrong. That, I think, is a testament, right? And employees who have been observed hold more positive safety beliefs. The gray is not observed, the gray is observed by a leader. So you can see in every situation, if the employee was observed, they had better safety beliefs. So this crew visit impacted the safety culture. And then leaders' opinion also changed as well, right? So they had to select, what are your top 2 things that you think this did? Well, my employees know I care about them as people, right? The employees I manage feel comfortable talking to me about a close call. These things just together can impact the culture. So did they see immediate results? Well, no, right? You have to cultivate that cultural soil to really make a difference. But long term, they did see a great impact. So you remember when I talked about when they first rolled out Safety Net, they had this, again, this traditional results. You got those peaks and valleys. Take a look at what happened after they rolled it out, right? You saw it dramatically increase. Now you can see that it looks like we're slowly, over the years, reducing the amount of observations. But in the last few years, they kind of plateaued. So that's why we're starting to do a new cultural initiative with this group. So did it make a difference? I know a lot of people are saying, well, all right, that's good, Chuck, but did it impact? Well, again, before we started, right, they're right around a 3, a total recordable rate of a 3. After they started doing this, you can see that every year they've been exponentially improving. I got to find out actually how they did last year and update this. But regardless, yes, fewer people are getting hurt. Their culture changed, and they use Safety Net to help drive, maintain, and manage the culture. Those crew visits I referred to, they had specific checklists designed just for senior level executives for those crew visits. They only had 4 questions that the senior level executives had to engage. They weren't assessing compliance on glasses or gloves. They just asked 4 questions. They'd go up to some craft guy and say, what are you working on today? Question number 1, what's the worst thing that could happen? Question number 2, what are you doing to prevent that? Question number 3. And the last one is, what can I do to help? Right? Those things just helped, right? And we're tracking that and trending it. So you remember I was talking about Kevin in the beginning. Well, much like Kevin, you're preparing for your journey, right? That's essential. Identifying those leading indicators and cultural proxies to measure is another crucial part of moving your culture from good to great. And really, you already have the enabling technology of Safety Net. All you have to do is identify those targets. Remember the exercise we did on what does a good, perfect safety culture look like? Identify those, measure, adjust, rinse, wash, and repeat. And pretty soon, you'll be able to predict where those injuries are going to occur, get in front of them, and eventually eliminate death on the job. So even though this cultural excellence is really a long journey, the impact on people's lives can be tremendous. Not only because we hurt fewer people, but because the journey builds a lasting, sustainable culture that's going to survive setbacks and derailment and strive because of them, right? We need to use the data that we gather to help us guide us on this journey, to give us feedback before we get on the wrong path and sprain our ankle, like Kevin did. Now, Kevin didn't finish his journey, but he's going to section hike the AT, which means you only do a certain section. You do these on vacations. But see, now he has a different vision, right? And that drives his sense of urgency. It's not really the destination, right? But it's the journey. And now he's looking forward to it. And who knows, maybe I'll join him because it's just outside my back door. And remember, we need to stop reacting to injuries and start predicting them. Thanks for your time today. And again, we'll get this information out to you. We do have a couple of minutes for questions. Kent, do we have any questions that are popping up?
Yes, no, not at the moment, but everybody, again, there's a chat function in the upper right-hand corner. If you have any questions, you know, please use that. You can send them to me or Chuck or to everyone. And again, we will send out the recorded webinar on this, and it'll also be posted on our predictivesolutions.com website. And also, like I mentioned earlier, we have We have this webinar every month. So June 2nd, 22nd is the next webinar, and also our conference is October 3rd through the 5th in Nashville. But it doesn't look like we have any questions popping through, Chuck. So if you can see Chuck's contact information on the screen as well. So
yeah, give me a call or shoot me an email. Yeah, I'm usually on the road somewhere, but I'm pretty good at responding to email. So, you know, if there's no questions, thank you so much for attending. You know, we look forward to seeing everyone in Nashville. We usually have a really good time and learn a lot of stuff, and it's really been valuable for a lot of our clients that have gone. So hopefully we'll see everyone there.
Okay, take care, everybody. Have a great one.